Welcome to this podcast for National Schools Training ILM Diploma Level 4 School Business Management Qualification. The topic area is Managing Risks in Schools. I am looking at Module 3, Emergency and Contingency Planning. The purpose of the podcast is to provide a brief insight into how a school business manager may become involved and lead this area. As an advanced school business manager, I am the School Business Manager Cluster Lead and facilitate the sharing of good practice and continuing professional development for school business managers. I undertake projects for schools, sharing advice and expertise. In this area, I was asked by a head teacher of a neighbouring school to assist their administrator in reviewing their emergency procedures and business continuity plan. After initial review, it was soon established that there were not robust systems in place and staff were not clear on evacuation and lockdown procedures for events other than fire evacuation. There were well-tested policies for closing the school in the event of snow and ice, and these type of events were not included in the review. This required that an emergency response action plan should be drawn up, a grab bag be compiled and a short bullet point action plan be devised for staff. The grab bag is the crisis bag, something that will contain all the items needed to assist with communication and the safe handover of pupils. The idea of the bag is that it should be taken as everyone evacuates the building, hence the name grab bag. The bag would contain a pupil contact list, which includes next of kin contacts for pupil and as well as staff, class list, medical details of staff and pupils, first aid kit, key contact lists, which lists key emergency LA contacts, as well as medical centres and other emergency services. It will contain a laptop which contained an electronic copy of the LA Emergency Response Guide, as well as hard copies of the key pages of the guide. A mobile phone containing numbers of emergency contacts and staff and next of kin for staff. The key to the village hall, instructions for a non-user to be able to send a text message via the text messaging service, and a torch. There was some discussion as to whether this should be a wind-up torch, but it was decided that a battery-up one would suffice. The storage location of the grab bag does need to be somewhere where it's easily accessible and accessed, but secure as it contained personal details. The laptop was one that was old but will still function. The idea is that its only use is for this procedure and it wouldn't be in constant use. The laptop, mobile phone have to be routinely checked to ensure battery powered is maintained. Contact lists have to be reprinted at least once a term. The evacuation and shelter procedure was then written. The priority of this is that we would have a short bullet point action plan that was very clear and concise. Fire evacuation procedures were in place and regularly tested and worked well. All staff were clear on this procedure, but we review it and it didn't really need to improve, so there was no need to change this other than to include this in the induction procedures for staff and volunteers. This ensured that they would have the knowledge to activate the fire alarm points and where they were located. Staff were reminded that on sounding the fire alarm it may include other events such as a bomb threat or another emergency. When considering the evacuation plan, I realised that the fire evacuation plan could be extended to cover all evacuations and add on the evacuation to a place to list the place of safe refuge. It was apparent while staff had very good knowledge of the procedure, it was not clearly displayed around school. This was remedied at the same time and is now displayed in all classrooms and corridors. If the entire site had to be evacuated, we required a safe place of refuge. The only place for this was the village hall. This created an issue as the key holder lived at the opposite end of the village to the hall. We then had to discuss this with the village hall committee, and they allowed us to have a key. This is stored in the grab bag. If there is a total evacuation, we needed to consider communication to parents, and this would follow the same guidance as school closure due to snow ice, for example. It is acknowledged that to access text messaging service, that as a member of staff may have to use their own smartphone or perhaps use a computer of a parent of a local public house. But it was felt that in the event of an emergency that this would be appropriate, and if necessary, staff would be asked to use their personal mobile phones to contact parents, and the costs could be refunded. The revised evacuation guidance is: on discovery of a fire, bomb threat or of an emergency requiring evacuation, the fire alarm will be a continuous bell of 15 seconds. All staff visitors will evacuate the building and assembly on the main playground. Office staff will vacate by the nearest fire exit, taking the grab bag, visitors book and pupil in-out register. The roll call: if evacuation of the school site is required, exit through the most appropriate gate. All staff will accompany the pupils to the village hall. The key stored in the grab bag. Telephone head teacher, chair of governors, director of education. Send text messages to all parents to request collection of children. We also had to consider our lockdown procedure. The guidance is that if a lockdown is required, all doors and windows should be locked, and if safe to do so, close blinds and wait for further advice. Any classes outside are to go to the nearest building and follow the same procedure. The entire process of the review took a relatively long time. This was due to the consideration given to what was appropriate. In managing risk, it is important to consider whether the response or steps in mitigating the risks are appropriate to the impact and the likelihood of the event. We recognise that the reasons for evacuation, if this occurred, it would be most likely because of fire or floods or events such as gas leaks. We did, however, have to think about hostile, violent attacks. Every point on the plan was discussed for items that are considered to have high impact. It is useful to be able to discuss your mitigation actions with at least one other person to test your judgments. This also ensures that important points are not overlooked. For example, an important point of the evacuation of the building is sounding the alarm. We considered whether all volunteers would know whether the nearest activation point is and how to activate it. This was easily remedied by including it in the Induction for Volunteers booklet. It also highlights that you can take steps to reduce the impact of risk, but you cannot take it away entirely. I hope that you found this illustration interesting.